ladies and gentlemen, they had everybody thinking that it was the right versus the left. That's simply not true. Plus, the alleged shooter, grandmother of Tyler Robinson, speaks out. She spoke some truth that the mainstream media dare not touch. Ladies and gentlemen, oh yeah, this thing got real deep. Let's get into some of this straight game.
Life is like those cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy Delray Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Do me a favor, click on the thumbs up button. Also, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And like I always say, if you want to be one of the first people notified when I drop some of the straight game, please do me a favor and click on what appears to be the little bell notification right below this video. I'm going to get right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say shocking news, just recently happened. As we've been listening to the media, various stories on YouTube, Instagram, the internet, somebody who's been very vocal about this, D.L. Hughley, and a few other people who've been on it. I would say Don Lemon. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been led astray. I don't really know what's going on as far as, but it seems like somebody has been trying to incite something in America that is based on a lie. When we first heard about the situation that happened in Utah, immediately people were coming out and saying that it was, some kind of left-wing conspiracy, if you will. And we've come to find out that that's simply not the truth. The young man who is in prison right now for allegedly killing Charlie Kirk, Tyler Robinson, his grandmother has spoke out. And what we don't hear the mainstream media, or most of the mainstream media, repeating is basically what she said in regards to the situation and what really happened and what's really going on and who is who and what is what. And so, like I said, when I saw that, I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, wow. Why wouldn't they want everybody to know what's going on and what's really happening, right? And you got to ask yourself that question as an American. And so what I wanted to do, because I've done some research, and I was like, oh, wow. This is something like the East-West Coast beef, if you will, within side of the Republican Party. But when they spoke about it, including Donald Trump, he spoke about it. He was like, the left-wing radical and blah, blah, blah. Ladies and gentlemen, it's simply not the truth. It's simply not the truth. And now that I understand that, I said to myself, I was like, I got to do a video about this. I got to do a video about this. I got to, talk to, my audience and let them know, because most people don't know really what's going on, And so what I came across, what I want to talk about first and foremost is this right here. I want you to check this out. One of the leading people that Donald Trump trusts her word, and like I said, and believes in what she says, is none other than Laura Loomer. Now, the situation and how they've been trying to build this narrative is as if, it's Republican versus Democrat and trying to create this like infighting, and it's simply not true. Laura Loomer, who is I believe, a Republican and a staunch supporter of Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump has respect for her. She has respect for him. She said in her video They not letting me do it. What's going on, man? We done froze up again. What's going on with the goings on, man? What's going on? Can y'all hear me? Okay. Yeah, there we go. So one of Donald Trump's staunch supporters, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, is none other than Laura Loomer. So now, I want you to read what she said the other day. This is prior to the shooting of Charlie Kirk. And this was posted on a platform, if you will. And I want you to read what it says. Laura Loomer says, I don't ever want to hear Charlie Kirk's 11 claim he is pro-Trump ever again after this weekend, right? I'd say he has revealed himself as a political opportunist, and I have had a front row seat to witness the mental gymnastics these last 10 years. Lately, Charlie has decided to become a charlatan, claiming to be pro-Trump one day while he stabs Trump in the back the next. TPUSA was only able to thrive thanks to the generosity of President Trump. And so when you read that, to me, that's eye-opening, right? And so I was like, wow, I thought, everybody was supposed to be on the same team. But evidently that's not what's happening, ladies and gentlemen. That's not what's happening. And so as you look at this and you see it, you understand what I'm talking about. But then that's not the only thing. I need to take you somewhere else. I need to take you here. Check this out. This next one. You see that? Okay. Now, well, no, you know what? Let's go here first. Let's go up here. The young man, Tyler Robinson's grandmother, because they wanted you to believe that it was somehow a Democrat or I guess a trans person or whatever have you, that allegedly had shot Charlie Kirk at the time when nobody knew actually what was going on, if you will. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew who was responsible for what, and so on and so forth. But like I said, they had everybody believing that somehow, some way, salute Yaya kids, what's good? That somehow, some way, that it was a Democrat or some left-wing radical person. Like I said, for me, I don't really feed into the Republican-Democrat thing. Like I said, I don't, it wouldn't, I guess, mean anything to me either way. Like I said, if you nominated and voted in for president, hopefully you be trying to do something positive. Hopefully you be trying to do something life-changing for everybody so that your legacy is something to be remembered throughout the centuries, the history, and all of that, right? So now, when you look at this, you got to understand something, right? It says, his grandmother, she says, I'm just so confused, Debbie said of her grandson's arrest. Tyler is the shyest person, she said. He has never, ever spoke politics to me at all. She insisted that Robinson has never, ever gotten into trouble in his life. I take that as being a grandmother's love, unconditional, and want to believe the best about her grandchild. That's how I look at that. On Friday morning, President Trump announced that after a days-long manhunt, a suspect had been taken into custody after Kirk 31 was shot dead during a speaking event at Utah Valley State University Wednesday. Kirk's death is assumed to have been a political assassination. as he was a prominent MAGA activist. Now, I want you to understand something. So when they saying this and they're reading this, the language and the information that it came out in regards to this was, it was a political assassination believed to be done by some left-wing person, radical person, preferably somebody who was transgender. And this is all of the things that people in the Republican stratosphere was saying in the narrative, right? But listen, now, the grandmother, according to public records, right? According to public records, Robinson's parents are both registered Republicans, right? His mother, Amber Robinson, 44, is a licensed social worker. His father, Matt Robinson, runs a business installing kitchen countertops, cabinets, and stone surfaces in their home city of Washington, Utah. Both of them have held hunting licenses, right? A Facebook post made by Amber Robinson describes one of Tyler's brothers as a gun-toting, cowboy-loving, brilliant kid. Now, I want you to hold on to that for a second. Because when I said that the media is actually not, reporting these facts, when I say some media outlets are not reporting the facts, it come to find out that Tyler Robinson is his family are staunch Republicans. They're not Democrats. As a matter of fact, Tyler Robinson's grandmother also said that she doesn't know anybody in her family who is a Democrat. They are Trump supporters. Full stop. Full stop. And with that being said and understood, it seems that somebody has been lying. Somebody has been trying to control a narrative. Somebody has been trying to create chaos in order to implement something else. Right? We already have the National Guard in D.C. We had the National Guard in Los Angeles. Right? And the crazy part about it is that nobody knew actually what was going on or who had done what at the time that it had happened. As a matter of fact, they didn't even know who the young man was. If it wasn't for him telling his father, and his father then telling a preacher, because according to his father, he wanted to commit suicide. And his father talked him out of it, and they called the preacher, and the preacher called the FBI. So the FBI really didn't know what was going on from that perspective either, right? So understanding this, and when you see this and you read that, you understand that, no, it's not what they've been telling us in the media. And that's why you got to be careful about the information that you digest, even from mainstream media. Because they get paid too by the government. They get paid by corporations to push certain messages, agendas, and things like that. Once again, you heard Steve Bannon say that we're at war. And I forgot the other guy name, another Fox guy. He was like, we're at war. And then they asked Donald Trump on Fox News about what does he wish to happen, or what does he think can happen to make this situation better. And he basically said, he didn't care. He didn't care. And when they asked him about Charlie Kirk, he started talking about some kind of ballroom being built in the back of the White House. They asked him about it in a press conference again. And he started talking about the ballroom thing again. So you got to ask yourself, when they thought that they knew what they were talking about, they were saying this left-wing, radical, and all of this, that, and the other. But the truth of the matter is, it was a Republican. Now let's get deeper into it, because this is the part that's really going to trip y'all out. Because I was like, oh wow, this is what's going on. So now, I showed you that. Let's do this. This is interesting because this explains the whole situation and what's going on. Remember, we're dealing with the bullets, the everything, right? And this right here, and to understand and to break down the bullets and the song Bella Ciao Ciao and all of that. So in my view, these inscriptions on the ammo casings, right? Notice is bulges, OWO, O Bella Ciao Ciao, Ciao Bella Ciao Ciao Ciao. Catch this, fascists. And if you're reading this, you are gay, laughing my ass off. These aren't random or left-leaning signals, ladies and gentlemen. You got to understand the deeper meaning, because I really didn't understand it until I did the research, right? These are not left-wing or whatever they call left-wing leaning signals, like some early reports claim. Instead, ladies and gentlemen, listen. They trace Tyler Robinson's political beliefs squarely to the fringes of the alt-right, specifically to the Groyper movement led by none other than Nick Fuentes. Now, if you need to look up who Nick Fuentes is, you need to look that up. It's like a white nationalist group, if you will. And he, kind of spearheads that. Him and the guy, Charlie Kirk were having some kind of disenchantment back and forth, because they felt like Charlie Kirk wasn't keeping it real, or he was some kind of poser. He was some kind of fake, if you will. May he rest in peace. But this is the reality of what was going on at that time. Little did we know, right? This is all coming to the surface. So now, this crowd positions itself, right? They're talking about the Groyper movement, right? This crowd positions itself as a hyper-patriotic, pro-Trump conservative, listen, pro-Trump conservatives who see mainstream Republicans like Charlie Kirk as a sellout or fake conservative. Listen, infected by globalism, liberalism, and even fascism, which they call fascism light, right? Right? Listen. And then you got to understand the meme that they put out. The bulges, OWO, bit is a crude, listen, what that bit about is it's a crude mocking and nod to transphobic memes. Now, I didn't know that until I read this, right? That originated on Tumblr, but got co-opted by the right-wing trolls to spot trans people in crowds, ladies and gentlemen. Right? So I get it now. The bulges, OWO. Okay. Like a guy's bulge in his pants, I guess, or whatever, to spot phobic people. I'm saying transgender people in a crowd, right? Co-opted by right-wing trolls and spot trans people in crowds. Pure Groyper-style bigotry, if you will. Bella Ciao, right? Flips an anti-fascist World War II partisan song into ironic ammo for ridiculing leftists, right? Bella Ciao. So that's something against, I guess leftists or whatever they want to call it, right? While tying into their beef with fascists. Listen, this is crazy. Like I said, it's like the East Coast, West Coast beef, if you will, right? So they got beef with Charlie Kirk's group of people, and this group of people believes that Charlie Kirk's group of people is soft. They posers, they sellouts, they fake conservatives, they fake gangsters. They not really representing it like they're supposed to. This is what's going on in the infighting of what's going on with them from that perspective, right? It's crazy. It's crazy, y'all. Establishment figures like Kirk, you see it, right? Whom Nick Fuentes has repeatedly trashed. So they going back and forth. It's like a rat beef. You know what I mean? They going back and forth, like Kendrick and Drake. They going back and forth, right? The gay taunt, listen, the gay taunt is a straight up homophobic bait emblematic of the group's anti-LGBTQ Q, venom. And catch this fascist, that's a direct shot at Kirk. Listen, so remember, the writing on that bullet, or on the ammunition, if you will, was to Kirk. So when he said catch this fascist, was a shot at him, framing the attack as a purging of a traitor from the right. Ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't no left-wing radical attack on Charlie Kirk or assassination on Charlie Kirk. Right? To understand what's going on so that you can't be gaslit. This is the reason why I'm doing this. You got to understand what's going on so that you can't be gaslit. And when people say certain things, right, knowing that it ain't really got nothing to do with you, they saying, whether you a Democrat or Republican, right? Overall, it's not Antifa or trans activism, right? It's the toxic underbelly of the MAGA ecosystem. Think about it. It's infighting, where online radicalization turns personal grievances into violence against perceived ideology impurities. Robinson's Republican registration, listen, ladies and gentlemen, Tyler Robinson's Republican registration and Trump donations fit the profile. A young guy steeped in gun culture and a pandemic era echo chambers, meaning when people were kind of stuck in the house during the pandemic, going through the computer, in these chat rooms and Discord chats and all of those things, right? Lashing out at the enemy within on his own side. Tragic, but a reminder that extremism doesn't care about party lines. It just amplifies hate, ladies and gentlemen. And you can see that that's basically what happened, right? It's amazing. So like I said, earlier, I had got cut off. That's not it though. This thing runs deep, man. It runs really, really deep. And so check it out. Who are the Groypers, right? Right? Sometimes called the Groypers Army, a group of alt-white, white nationalists and Christian nationalist activists. So they white nationalists and they Christian nationalists. So I guess any other Christian really wouldn't fit in with them. You a black Christian, you can't get no love from them from that perspective, right? But like I said, once again, talking about God fearing and all of the other things that, they purport, right? Listen, activists led by Nick Fuentes, members of the group have attempted to introduce alt-right politics into mainstream conservatism in the United States and participated in the January 6th United States Capitol attack, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. And the protests leading up to it. They have targeted other conservative groups and individuals whose agendas they view as too moderate and insufficiently nationalist, right? The Groyper movement has been described as white nationalist, homophobic, nativist, fascist, sexist, anti-Semitic, in an attempt to rebrand the declining alt-right movement, ladies and gentlemen. Amazing. Amazing. And so, like I said, once again, this is what the mainstream media is not telling us, ladies and gentlemen. They're not telling us this. They're not keeping it 100. And so it was another thing that I seen, and I didn't really understand it during the press conference. The FBI director, Kash Patel, he had said, I'll see you in Valhalla, right? And what is that? Is that like heaven? What is that? Right? And Valhalla in alt-right, listen, in alt-right and white nationalist circles, Valhalla has been co-opted as a symbolic term very different from its original Norse mythological meaning. Here's what it usually signifies in that world: martyrdom, a warrior's afterlife. Valhalla is often invoked as a kind of afterlife reward, So I guess Cash Patel believes that Charlie Kirk is going to be rewarded in the afterlife. And so he says that he will see him in Valhalla, if you will, right? For example, extremists may say someone went to Valhalla after committing violence, trying to glorify them as a fallen warrior, right? Now, to Cash Patel, that could mean, one thing, but they said that the alt-right has co-opted that to mean something in reference to what they're doing, what they're following. I find this very interesting, ladies and gentlemen, and the reason, like I said, once again, if you see the video, the thing that troubled me the most was that when Charlie Kirk was out here, all he was talking about usually, right, was black women and, how black women used affirmative action and stealing white people's spot because they weren't intelligent enough or they didn't have the brain processing power to be able to stand on their own and all of these other things, right? And I found that to be, once again, when you understand what's going on, it's a whole lot of gaslighting going on. And you need to be aware of the gaslighting that's going on so that you're not gaslit. A lot of lies, a lot of untruths, right? So now, another thing, perpetuating, and it was interesting enough that the last words that Charlie Kirk spoke was based on, he said, you mean besides gang violence, right? And bow, that's when you heard the shot go off. It was like, whoa, and if you've seen it, it was horrifying. But like I said, once again, we're looking at it and we're seeing it, and then it travels across the media, and then the immediate reaction is like, oh, what's going on? And then everybody immediately starts to come out and said, oh, it's a radical left wing this, it's a radical left wing that. Ladies and gentlemen, that wasn't the truth. And I thought to myself it was a little bit premature because nobody knew what was going on, right? Nobody. And then now they got HBCUs locked down, right? For what? Based on what? What is that about? Is that trying to attack the educational system of African Americans? Once again, we're talking about gaslighting, ladies and gentlemen. You get it? So everything that's going on right now, a lot of it is based on lies. Charlie Kirk also talked about how many black fathers weren't in the house with their kids and all of this, that, and the other, right? He was pushing a certain kind of agenda, a certain kind of narrative in regards to African Americans, trying to paint us as unintelligent. And like I said, all of the inventions that African Americans have invented in this country, are you kidding me? Once again, it was based on gaslighting because none of those things were true. Who built the White House? The slaves. Who stole Michelle Obama's speech and used it basically as her speech when Trump got elected the first time? Melania did. That's a fact. That's a fact, right? So if African Americans or Michelle Obama, as Charlie Kirk was talking about, along with Ketanji, the sister that's in the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown, right? How did she get there? She went to law school. Michelle Obama went to law school. Princeton, Harvard, Barack, Harvard, right? These people graduated at the top of their class of colleges. Ain't steal anybody's position. And the ironic thing is that both Charlie Kirk and Tyler Robinson attended, I believe, 1 year of college each, right? And I go mainly dealing with Charlie Kirk because he was basically talking about African American stealing his or white people's position when that wouldn't be true, because they couldn't have stolen his position because he didn't finish his position. Right? So most people weren't even paying attention to that. They were looking at the fact, and when you and I, you know, like I said, when I caught up with him, like got up on him, you know, after the situation involving the African American dude who stabbed the white Ukrainian girl, when he came on and they had put him on CNN, and what he had said was that he did that because she was white. But I was like, oh wow. Then I pointed to the picture of the video I did yesterday. I said, well, you know, I don't know if that's true. He doesn't know if that's true. But once again, he was using that situation to gaslight white people, right? To get white people all riled up. When we don't know what that guy was thinking, that African-American guy was thinking about that. And like I said, once again, and so I was like, well, you know, that's a one-sided story, because he said that also that if, you know, if that was a white guy who stabbed somebody who was black, it'd be all over the news. Then he used George Floyd as an example. I'm like, that's not the same thing. That was a police officer who was supposed to serve and protect, right? That's not a parallel situation. And what would be a parallel situation is Dylan Roof dealing with those 9 people at that. And the funny thing was that the situation with the African American guy happened in was at North Carolina, and the situation with Dylan Roof happened in South Carolina when Dylan Roof walked up in the church, act like he wanted to pray with the African American churchgoers, and killed all 9 of them. Right? So if you're going to tell a story, it's like the truth doesn't really matter. I just want to tell the story I want to tell to get you riled up. I don't think the young lady from Ukraine deserved to die, like I said yesterday. I don't think Charlie Kirk deserved to die. And I'm damn sure them black people at that church that was going to church and praying, they damn sure didn't deserve to die. Right? So like I said, what we have is a people problem. Right? Violence and so on and so forth. And some people, you know, are sometimes are mentally ill, if you will, you know, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to diagnose that. But Charlie Kirk would attempt to diagnose and say who's what and what's what and all of these other things. So now, what we have here is we all being gaslit, ladies and gentlemen. We're being gaslit. Like I said, once again, you got inflation going up and all of these other things that are going on right now, and no politician is trying to pass any kind of sensible gun legislation or anything like that. Nope. You know, 1 minute it's the hopes and prayers. At the same time the situation was going on with Charlie Kirk, there was a school shooting in Colorado, right? And they were having trouble trying to cover both of those and trying to see which one was more significant, if you will. They were straddling the fence on that, you know? Just 2 weeks before, it was the kids were in the church, in the Catholic school, right? And somebody went in there and shot the school up while they were in there praying, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a black or white thing. This is a human thing. This is a people thing, right? So the reason why I did this video is the fact that, you know, if you being gaslit and you being led to believe that somebody hates you, you hate somebody, you know, Charlie Kirk is dead. Tyler Robinson in jail. It don't matter if they white or black or whatever, but okay. Because see, Charlie Kirk, he basically was on this African Americans, you know, commit most of the violence and blah, 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 and why all African Americans are the most ones filling up the jails and blah, blah, blah. A lot of the stuff he was factually wrong about. And when challenged on it, he would say, so I was right about that then, right? Once again, the gaslight. Because now, if you're a thinking person, it would take you off your pivot. You'd be like, you know, no. And then the crowd in the background, they had their MAGA hats on. They be like, ooh, like you got him, you got him. No, he didn't. Right? Anybody who tried to debate with him was basically outnumbered. And when he was wrong or got found wrong or he wasn't right on a certain situation, he's like, okay, I'll give you that, and then keep on going to where he thought he could talk about something and where he would have the advantage. Right? You had to pay attention to what was really going on. I was watching. I'm like, oh. And so I see the people and I'm like, oh, he got him. He got him. He got all of these people gaslit. He got these young people gaslit. Right? He's speaking to what they think they love and their cause or whatever it is that they think they represent. And so when you delve into it, it wasn't no a left wing radical. It wasn't that. It was somebody from the inside. They said the MAGA movement having inner turmoil because hate can't distinguish between party lines. Right? It just can't. People have different ideologies and different beliefs and things like that. And it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Like I said, I showed you this. And this is the crazy part about this. Now, like I said, you deal with Laura Loomer. And when the person who posted this said, what? Don't forget Laura Loomer targeted Charlie Kirk just days before. And now I wouldn't call this targeting him, but I would basically, she called him out. This is calling him out right here. I don't want to ever hear Charlie Kirk's claim to be, he is pro-Trump. And basically they were saying that he came in and rode the Trump wave to success. And like I said, and garnered all of this support. And so she was calling him a charlatan, claiming to be pro-Trump one day while he stabs Trump in the back the next. TPUSA was only able to thrive thanks to the generosity of President Trump. These are people who appear to be on the same page, but they're not. So you got to ask yourself, you supporting whoever you want to support. Not here to tell you that. You got to ask yourself, is it for the betterment of you and your family? Right? Because a lot of people vote against their own best interest. And they vote their skin color, which is crazy. It's like, you trying to, do better for your family. I'm for the person who's going to try to help uplift the country and uplift the people and hopefully move it. Because like I said, death is the great equalizer. Death is the great equalizer, ladies and gentlemen. It makes all of us equal. I don't care how much money you got. I don't care what kind of plane you fly, what kind of yacht you drive, right? Death is the great equalizer, the common denominator. So, and all of us, we ultimately meet that moment of truth, right? But it's how you want to live that you can decide. And what you want to believe is what you can decide, right? Hating the next man, that don't give you nothing. It gives you more grief than it give him. We see what that has led up to. Once again, Charlie Kirk's main focus was, blacks killing blacks. Who's killing all of the people in Chicago? What color are they? Right? Think about it. His last words out of his mouth, what? Other than gang violence. Basically going into talking about African Americans and the gang violence. And boom. His life was taken by another white guy. Right? So, you can say, well, a lot of people I heard say, this white on white crime has to stop. Or this white on white violence has to stop. We need to send the National Guard to Utah. But that's not true. Right? But this is the narrative that's being used in African American cities with African American mayors. Right? Once again, the great gaslight. And not to say that all of them cities are as safe as they can be. Like I said, I think there is more that can be done. But there are other cities, right, that have, white mayors and white governors, cities and states, that could use that same, but they're not being sent there. Once again, pay attention to what's going on. And like I said, I'll say this, that the only thing that they could come up with Barack Obama, and they hated him so much because of the color of his skin. No more than that. The man, I tripped off of this. This is another gaslight move. Now watch this. This is the most craziest gaslight thing I've ever heard when you think about dealing with situations like this. Barack Obama got the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act was the real name of the legislation that he got passed, right? But they called it Obamacare. Trump called it Obamacare. He was, once again yelling from the sidelines, Obamacare, it's Obamacare. And they called it Obamacare, right? When it was actually called the Affordable Care Act, which gave people the opportunity to take care of the one of the most valuable things that you have. That money sometimes I don't care how much money you got, your health, right? Health care. No matter how much money you got, right? If your health ain't good, your health ain't good. You can ask Steve Jobs. That Steve Jobs had $9 billion when he died. He couldn't write a check to no doctor and say, Doc, I want to stay here for 3 more weeks. Doctor couldn't do it. It's time to go. It's checkout time, man. Charlie Munger, who I respected, one of Warren Buffett's best friends. They were really cool. Charlie Munger, he was an investor. One of the guys I respect, as an investor, reading up a lot about him and things like that, because I also trade stocks. When Charlie Munger, it was time for Charlie Munger to go, Charlie Munger he could write a check. He could write a check for $100 million. Doc, I need to stay here 6 more months. It's time to go. Because God said so. Because it's just that time. When you understand that, you're not going to be grappling with he black, he white, whatever, I'm trying to get you to, that's for somebody else to win. They're trying to control or throw a spin on you, manipulate you into voting for them and telling you that they're going to do this. Remember the gaslight. Trump said when he was out of office, he said, I'm going to end that Ukraine war in the first day in office. Has it ended? No. The lie. Why? You don't have to. I'm going to do my best. And your best is always good enough. It ain't, you don't have to, once again, it's too many unforeseen things to make a promise like that. You're dealing with people losing their lives, in astronomical numbers, But once again, if you believed it, then that's on you. So, like I said, at the end of the day, it's crazy, man. They had us thinking that it was some radical left person when it was basically infighting between 2 groups of white nationalists. One called the Groypers and the other one that Charlie Kirk represented, if you will. Yeah. For the people who just came in, I'm going to bring you back to it. Like I said, if you haven't seen it, here it is right here. What? The second paragraph. The crowd positions itself, talking about the Groypers now, right? Listen, the crowd positions itself as hyper-patriotic, pro-Trump conservatives. This is not the one that Charlie Kirk represents, right? Here's his TPUSA, right? This is the Groypers, right? They said they were part of the January 6th crowd and, started with the protests and participated in that. Listen, right? Pro-Trump conservatives who see mainstream Republicans. So they're pro-Trump conservatives who see mainstream Republicans like Charlie Kirk as sellouts or fake conservatives infected by globalism, liberalism, or even fascism like the Bulges. OWO bit is a crude mocking nod to transphobic memes that originated on Tumblr. It's crazy. And then you go to the third paragraph, right? It said overall, it's not Antifa or trans activism. It's a toxic underbelly of the MAGA ecosystem, where online radicalization turns personal grievances into violence against perceived ideology impurities. Robinson's Republican registration and Trump donations fit the profile of a young guy steeped in gun culture, pandemic era echo chambers, lashing out at the enemy within on his own side. Ladies and gentlemen, it don't get no deeper than that. And like I said, once again, if you don't know, now you know. So, to the people who, my subscribers, I appreciate each and everybody in the chat tonight. Like I said, this ain't how we usually get down, but we get down with everything over here. You know what I mean? Like I said, you better inform yourself. You better be aware of what's going on. You know what I mean? So that when you hear something on the news, you know what's going on and you're able to discern truth from lies. Right? Gaslighting, from facts. We say Wesley said need further debate. Yeah, now, I wouldn't even say it needs debate. This is what's going on. Like I said, my thing is understanding the politics and understanding, where you stand, as an individual, each of us as individuals in this society, right? And you think about it, like for Charlie Kirk situation, him doing the tours on the college campuses, popping with the same old questions. Man, listen, that's like as an African-American male, somebody grasping on to Barack Obama when he was in office and be like, prove me wrong. And going around to college campuses, be they HBCUs or, Ohio State, Utah, whatever it is, prove me wrong. And going and talking about, black nationalism and all of these things and how they feel about God and Jesus and all of those things and so on and so forth, right? That would be the same thing. Well, in, let's say, 8 years, because Barack Obama did 2 terms, that in 4 years, somebody is going to be a new president. The climate is going to change for whatever, good or bad or indifferent. People trying to hold on to power. People are going to start seeing what's going on. And once they realize what's really going on, people are not going to be able to hold their jobs because people are going to stop believing in the fake hate or what's being perpetuated, if you will. It's like, what? They out here risking their life, for somebody who is going to be going off into the limelight with $5-6 billion and they broke and ain't got no money, ain't got no pension, ain't got no retirement, right? Man, that's a hell of a way to go out. That's a hell of a way to go out. So, you got to make your own decisions, man. Like I said, I did this video so that people understand what's going on. Like I said, Charlie Kirk, his whole thing was, black on black crime and black on black violence and all that. I mean, if he said it from a concerned perspective, you can understand that, but that's not where he was coming from. And black women can't do this. They can't think. They only stealing some white person's things through affirmative action, DEI and this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth. And the black pilots and just all of this hateful rhetoric. And Jews, he said, Charlie Kirk said Jews, messed up American culture with their money. What does he mean by American culture? Let's be clear. American culture is Indian culture. Point blank, period. The Indians were here and some African Americans before anybody. You can sit there and you want to debate that yourself and tell yourself, oh, that wasn't what it was. And you're okay. Right. You can ask the Canadians that. They still pay the Indians now. Money from the government. And they let them have their own reservations and things like that. You know what I mean? Come on. We know what the truth is. Like I said, once again, you can't run from that. You can try. You know, you go to Africa right now, the same thing when they had apartheid and all of that's over now. All of that's over. So like I said, you can try, but the people are beginning to wake up, and it's like, you know what? Like, what am I doing? What's going on? And then, the cold part about the game was this. When that shot rang off, right? Listen, I want you to pay attention to something. When that shot rang off, all of that Christian conservatism and all of that wanting to be, everybody ran. For what? For their life. Everybody ran for their life. But nobody standing around talking about, I'm the alt-right this and I'm that. No. Everybody ran. And they hauled a Charlie Kirk to that black truck trying to get him to the hospital to save his what? His life. So when you understand, man, what it's really truly about, it's about life. And if you got a lot of your life to still live your life. Don't follow no ideology. Don't follow nobody talking about, yeah, I represent this and I represent that. It doesn't mean anything. Because you seen when the shot rang out, what happened? Everybody ran for their life. Right? It's crazy, man. It's crazy. So like I said, that's the reason why I did this video. More importantly, stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate each and everybody that tuned in tonight. When you think about it. Yeah, you said what you say, Christopher. Christopher said he didn't even go to the hospital, huh? Yeah, I didn't really see anybody, JP6 Gunner. I didn't see nobody stand and cheer, nothing like that. But, you know what I mean? All I seen was people running. Everybody was running. Anybody that stood and cheered, like I said, I didn't see that. I wasn't looking for that either. I'm like, I'm just thinking, like I said, I really didn't know who the guy was. And then once the stuff start popping up, I start looking online to see what he was saying. I was like, oh. I'm like, oh, I see why, And then I looked at the crowd and it was mostly white. And I'm like, okay. So he's speaking to something that they might hold or some of the grievances that they might have or feel or whatever it is. But like I said, once again, you got to ask yourself, he being paid. He getting money going around preaching like this, right? And you got to ask yourself, like, well, what's in it for me? He throwing hats in the crowd. Oh, you got a MAGA hat. Oh, okay. Make America great again. Make America great again. Well, according to what happened the other day, that didn't make America great again. It actually didn't. That's the reality of it. That's not what I'm saying. That's just what happened, right? And what they told people, like I said, it was some radical left. It wasn't that. It was two people who considered themselves Republican who supported Donald Trump. That's a fact. Can't run from that. Right? So now what's the narrative? So how do they, stir that up in the pot and try to come up with some kind of new narrative when the facts don't bow with the narrative that they're trying to kick? That's what you call God. See, when God comes into the play, all of that shit go to the wayside, man. I'm telling you now, look, you can play, I'm the most powerful, yeah, okay. Okay, not when God come into play. I don't care who you are. When God come into play, if it's time, like I said, when it's time to go, it's time to go. When it's time for the nonsense to stop, there will be things that you can't control. There'll be situations that you can't control that are out of your hands. If you're a good person, you're trying to do good by people, and you can look at it. You can look at the situation. As much as they hated Barack Obama, right? Nobody tried to assassinate him. Nope. Right? Because people understood, what, I might not, and it's a couple of people that came on, and I think it was one of the guys who was working his detail and who was Secret Service. And the guy was speaking on a YouTube video, and I heard him, and he said about Barack Obama. He said, you know what? I really didn't like Barack Obama. He said, but it was a time that they came home and they were bringing soldiers home, dead soldiers from overseas from something that had happened. And he said, Barack Obama stood up there and salute, what a sharp salute, as the bodies were brought off the plane. And he stood there the whole time and he didn't move. He said, you know what? I really didn't like everything that I knew about him. He said, but at that point right there, I had to respect him. I had to respect him. You know what I mean? And that's the difference. Everybody might not gonna like you. And you as a person, me as a person, whatever, right? But hopefully, not all the time, hopefully, that you'll be there long enough where they'll be able to earn your respect and you their respect. That's the difference. But every day when it's gaslighting, when it's lying, when it's this, when it's that, when it's this, you know what I mean? It's like, you know what? After a while, you know, and it's not like we're Donald Trump's woman or wife or somebody who got to put up with that, right? After a while, people start to see it and they like, you know what? This is not about anything. You know, this is not about what they said it was about or what it was going to be about. I was bamboozled. I was hoodwinked. I was led astray. You know, at one time you heard Cash Patel and before he became the director of the FBI talking about, yeah, the Epstein files, you know, they got to come out there. You know, there's this, that, and the other. They ask him about it now. He can't even say the same thing. Once again, it's about respect, being consistent, right? When you say something, right? Standing on it. You know, but that's what he has to deal with as a man. As a man, and throughout history, when people speak your name and they speak about you through history, and what does your legacy mean? Right? It's just crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. You know, I was in D.C., Maryland a few weeks ago, and I heard the thing about Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland, right? And listen, you gotta understand, this is great. And Donald Trump said that they were at an Army-Navy game, I believe, and Donald Trump said Wes Moore told him that he was a great president and the greatest president and this, that, and the other. And they actually pulled up the audio of the meeting, right? They pulled up the audio of the meeting. And Wes Moore didn't say what Donald Trump said he said. You see what I'm saying? Like, why? Here's an African American man in Wes Moore, right? Who's the governor of Maryland, voted by the citizens of the state of Maryland to become their governor. And Donald Trump would make and tell a lie like that, and not thinking that they could actually pull up the audio and to see that Wes Moore didn't actually say it. Amazing. Amazing. And it's like, it's just on and on and on and on and on. And it's like, damn, really? About something like that? That's so insignificant. Whether Wes Moore said that about him or not. But to prove that factually that he didn't was like, oh. So then you begin to look at the person differently every time. Like, damn, why would he lie about that? Damn, he lied about that. He lied about that. Then he lied about that and they proved it. But then he called it a hoax. Like, what? You know, the Epstein thing. That's another thing that's funny too. Because Donald Trump said this Epstein hoax. And so when you say something like that, it's a thing. So now, Ghislaine Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, if you will, right? She's in jail for a hoax. She got 20 years for a hoax. You know, you got to make it make sense. So if she's in jail and it's a hoax, right? My thing is, let her out. Pardon her. Give her a pardon. Yeah, it's a hoax. All of it's a hoax. These women who talking about that they're victims, they're lying? Really? amazing. So, you know, like I said, God is in charge, y'all. You know, we can sit back and think about what we think about. But yeah, you know, Grandma dropped the bombshell, ladies and gentlemen. She said she don't know no Democrats in her family. Everybody's Republican, despite what the narrative was that Donald Trump tried to run with and all of these other people tried to run with. Who knows why? It is what it is, right? And the media, you know, just to be perfectly honest, need to start being honest with the people, because at the end of the day, they lose credibility too. That's why you hear everybody going to now to YouTube and other sources of media, because, you know, if we dealing with YouTube, so you're doing a split if you're part of the program, right? And there's no need to lie. The government ain't giving, you know, people no money. You know what I mean? You know, I ain't taking no money from nobody. It's just basically calling it like you see it, and you can see right through it. Right? It's transparent. Point blank, period. So like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Your boy Delray, straight gang.
Life is like those cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother